Hi lovelies, hi there, and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, karibu sana. If you're a returning subscriber, karibu. And if you haven't subscribed yet, kindly do. Alright? If there's anything I have belabored on this channel, is to protect your womb. Protect your womb from not letting just any man access it. Protect your womb because it is such an important portal between, the living, the spiritual and the 3D. But another layer that I feel is very crucial for me to also talk about is to consider the circumstances which you're bringing a child into. And when I talk about circumstances, yes, the environmental circumstances and whatever is going on around you, but even more importantly, what is going on within you mentally, what headspace are you in?
Piece of research that I wish everybody knew about. And stay with me because this starts off crazy and then gets crazier as I go. Okay, so the first piece that you have to understand is that the egg that made you was present inside of your maternal grandmother. And here's why. Women are born with all of the eggs that they will ever have, meaning that those eggs must be created in utero. So whilst your biological mother was inside the womb of your grandmother, your egg was also present. Meaning, to a certain extent, you existed inside of your maternal grandmother. Besides this being a random, crazy, kind of odd piece of science, this actually has significant ramifications for who you are. As we've learned more about how genes work, we've learned about a concept called epigenetics, which basically is saying that the expression of your genes can and will be modified by environmental factors in real time, which suggests that whatever was going on in your maternal grandmother's life while she was pregnant with your biological mother has directly impacted your genes. This is known as epigenetic transgenerational inheritance, meaning that the environmental conditions that were being experienced by your maternal grandmother acted on the egg that made you to potentially modify your genetic expression. There's a particularly dramatic example of this historically in what is known as the Dutch hunger winter. What basically happened is during World War II, there was a discrete period of about 6 months where the Dutch experienced extreme famine. And for those who survived, we have been able to track what happened to the individuals who were in utero during the famine, but never experienced the famine outside of the womb. And there's a lot of interesting evidence about what happened to those individuals who were in utero during that famine. But what's crazier is that effects were seen in their children. So the offspring of the individuals who had been in utero during the famine also have demonstrated, for example, metabolic changes. The BMI in the grandchildren of the individuals who were pregnant during the famine tends to be higher, and that association has been linked to epigenetic changes. Is that making sense? How crazy is that? Somebody experiences a famine. They're pregnant during that famine. They survive the famine. Their offspring suffer the consequences of that famine, including things like metabolic changes, which of course would be evolutionarily adaptive. And then their children, none of whom have experienced famine, still demonstrate those same metabolic changes, struggling with higher BMIs as a byproduct of what happened to their grandparents for 6 months. So it's worth doing the homework and finding out what was going on with your maternal grandmother when she was pregnant with your biological mother, because that may have had a direct impact on your genetic profile. Scientific literature on this topic is pretty dense, but if you just Google Dutch hunger winter epigenetics, you'll find a ton of easy to digest resources. I find all of it absolutely fascinating. For anybody who is ever wondering why they are the way they are or trying to make sense of the effects of intergenerational trauma, this provides another level of scientific understanding. It's worth checking out.
Let me give you my own story time. In 2017, we were planning on having a baby, but that's the same year that my dad passed away. And I instinctively knew that was not the right time to have a child. because again, instinctively, I felt that the grief rather, the mourning period, I knew it would somehow impact any child I would choose to carry at that point. And so we opted not to have the child at that time, not to conceive at that time, and to put it off till later, till I was in a better headspace. And when I was finally ready to conceive, I stumbled on this information that is on the TikTok, whereby a woman who is pregnant actually impacts genetically on their children, particularly if it is a girl child. And I knew again for some reason that I was going to have a girl for a baby, because Mr. Man's family, they're mostly, the brothers mostly have girls. So I was like, I kind of knew. And so I was appreciative that I listened to my instincts not to conceive at that time and to put it off until such a time when I felt I was mentally okay, because I knew the hormones that I would release during the period of grief would obviously go to my baby. I knew that even mentally I was not in the right headspace to raise a baby at that time, because I was so consumed with the grief of losing my dad. So I'm happy that I listened to myself. That said, one should really, 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 really consider the circumstances they're bringing their child into. The environment, like the TikToker said, is there a drought? Is there a hardship, environmental hardship of some sort? Are you going through persecution? And then internally, are there certain things you need to heal from, such as abandonment issues? All these things ultimately end up affecting your child. I'd encourage you to read these 2 books. That is The Body Keeps Score, Brain, Mind and Body in the Healing of Trauma by Bessel van der Kolk. The second book I'd love for you to read is Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, America's Legacy of Enduring Injury and Healing by Joy DeGray. Anyway, those 2 specific books, I love them because they talk about trauma, whether it's short-term trauma and particularly prolonged trauma, and how it ends up having an impact physiologically, not just on the mental plane, but also physiologically, and how it ends up manifesting physiologically, and how ultimately it ends up impacting even on your genes. So you can imagine yourself as a woman choosing to have a child under strenuous circumstances, either environmental or internal. Ultimately, that has an effect on your child. And I wish more women would actually pay attention. Fine, you want a child, and I'm not saying that you have no right to have a child, but a child has not chosen to be born. You understand that? You, out of your own volition, are the one who has chosen, who has opted to bring a child into this world. A child has not asked you to be born. You are the one who has opted to bring a child into this world. So why then would you not consider the circumstances, both internal, endogenous and exogenous, that you're bringing this child into? Well, if you need to do some healing, particularly in terms of abandonment or some any other trauma that you have undergone, why wouldn't you not consider bringing your child in better circumstances? Because ultimately that child ends up being affected, and not just your child. Particularly if you carry a girl child, you actually end up also affecting at a genetic level your grandchildren. Okay, so I wish more women would actually, it's very easy to brush me off, and fine, brush me off, but you cannot negate facts. You cannot run away from facts. There are certain things you will not run away from. Reality facts, you will never run away from them. So if you are choosing to have a child, consider the circumstances which you are bringing that child into. And that's why part of protecting your womb is actually considering the man you're having that child with. Because if he's a man who's going to stress you, if it's a man who's not able to provide for you, if it's a man who is abusing you, already you have set it up that your child, you're bringing that child into strenuous circumstances. Okay, and that's going to actually affect you. All right. So I wish more women would actually pay attention to not just the desire to have children, but to actually pay attention into the circumstances which they are bringing their children in. I know there's this very hot debate where there is this discussion of whether, for instance, poor people should have children. It is not my place to say that, whether a poor person should have children or not, and what is poverty really. It's very, very subjective. But let's be honest. Surely, if you cannot provide the basic needs for your children, food, shelter, clothing, education, healthcare, at the most basic level, you surely have no business having a child. That's my 2 cents. I know it sounds classist. I know it sounds privileged. But why would you choose to bring a child into those circumstances? Why would you choose to bring your child into more suffering? Because you're making a bad situation worse. All right. So I wish more women would actually put into consideration this very crucial element of bringing children into this world. That is, what are the endogenous, what are you feeling internally? Have you healed? Have you dealt with issues such as trauma? Have you dealt with, issues such as abandonment? Okay. What have you dealt with issues such as, mother wounds and father wounds, particularly those that are very, very deep? Because if you do not deal with those things other than genetically, you're also going to, on a more mental capacity, you're going to actually project those same issues to your children. And children are not supposed to solve your issues. Children are not supposed to solve your issues. So why are you subjecting them into those circumstances rather? I'm curious what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section, and kindly look at those 2 books, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, America's Legacy of Enduring Injury and Healing. And this particular one is a touchy one because it actually shows how over the centuries of going through slavery, African Americans on a genetic level have been affected by slavery on a genetic level. They have passed on trauma from generation to generation. And of course, for them, it's a bit different in terms of, the conditions where they were in slavery. But even now, you can actually see elements of the slave syndrome actually being manifested in their children. And until and unless somebody actually chooses to heal at an individual level and to break that cycle, then they're actually passing on that information genetically to succeeding generations. So I'm curious what you guys think. Let me know in the comment. Until next time, I'll see you on the next one. Toodles.